the military project that was classified for 50 years. Imagine standing before an oak table in a cavernous, fluorescent-lit archive, the air thick with the musk of aging paper. A single metal clasp resists your pull, sealing away thousands of pages stamped "Top Secret, Eyes Only." With each creak of the lid, the silence of 50 years fractures, and a story long buried begins to breathe again. This is the moment CIA analysts uncovered Operation Halyard in July 1997, unearthing an epic wartime rescue that rewrites our understanding of heroism, sacrifice, and the tangled politics of World War II. By mid-1944, the Balkans pulsed with conflict. The Dinaric Alps formed a jagged spine of resistance and reprisal, its forested valleys crisscrossed by partisan trails. From Ploiesti's oil fields to Budapest's steel factories, Allied bombers unleashed thunder against the Axis war machine. But for every target struck, one or two B-24s and B-17s limped home with shattered wings. Or not at all. Dozens of airmen parachuted into hostile terrain, stripped of supply lines, exposed to frost, wild animals, and German patrols. Before the CIA, there was the OSS, President Roosevelt's pet project to centralize intelligence and covert action. Wild Bill Donovan recruited experts from every discipline. Archaeologists turned code breakers, movie stunt pilots, law students fluent in Slavic tongues. Their mandate stretched from sabotage to diplomacy, forging alliances as unpredictable as war itself. Among their wildest blueprints lay a daring airlift deep in enemy territory, a mission so sensitive that it would remain secret until the end of the Cold War. Yugoslavia's resistance fractured into two main factions. General Draža Mihailović led the royalist Chetniks, a network of guerrillas loyal to King Peter. Josip Broz Tito commanded the communist partisans, gaining ground with Soviet backing. Initially, Britain supported Mihailović, then pivoted to Tito in early 1944, fearing Soviet post-war hegemony. In 10 months, Churchill's letter would strangle Chetnik supply lines, yet central Serbia, Mihailović's stronghold, remained a vital corridor for stranded Allied flyers. Reports of downed airmen in the Dinaric Alps reached OSS headquarters in London with increasing urgency. Each stranded pilot represented not just a life, but a wealth of intelligence and morale. Donovan authorized a bold plan: build a hidden landing strip in Prenjani, link to Allied command by radio, extract survivors under moonlight. No precedent existed for such an operation. Success would depend on speed, secrecy, and the willingness of unlikely allies. Lieutenant George Thavaev Mussolin carried the ideal resume. OSS veteran, parachute instructor, fluent in Serbo-Croatian. Master Sergeant Michael Rajacic had engineered improvised bridges in North Africa. Specialist Arthur Jibilian wielded radio equipment like a symphony conductor. Colonel Robert McDowell volunteered as pilot, a daredevil with 200 combat sorties. Together, they formed a team that blended linguistics, engineering, communications, and raw courage. On July 21, 1944, a stripped-down C-47 touched down on a covert drop zone miles from Prenjani. The forest swallowed the aircraft's silhouette as operatives disembarked. The scent of pine resin mingled with wet earth. At the edge of the clearing, local guerrillas greeted them silently, rifles cradled but unthreatening. One young Chetnik, Stefan Petrovich, handed Mussolin a loaf of cornbread and a nod of respect. No words needed. By lantern light, Rajacic and Chetnik sappers surveyed a sloping ridge. They drove bamboo stakes to mark an 800-meter trajectory, then measured gradients with a hand level and plumb bob. Standard airfield construction manuals lay silent in Allied libraries. Here, improvisation ruled. Villagers felled trees with axes and handsaws. They dug trenches by hand, hauling rock in woven baskets to shore up embankments against mudslides. Each stroke of the pickaxe echoed through the valley like a heartbeat. Without bulldozers or steamrollers, the team achieved remarkable precision. Bamboo scaffolding held cut logs in place as makeshift retaining walls. Gravel beds were compacted by marching villagers carrying sacks of sand, their boots acting as primitive tampers. Wooden planks, salvaged from dismantled barns, formed the runway surface. Mussolini ordered every nail driven twice to prevent boards from popping under aircraft weight. Through torrential rain and creeping daylight, the runway took shape, an engineering miracle born of necessity. In a moss-covered cabin, Specialist Jibilian assembled his wireless set. He tuned a portable crystal oscillator to an agreed frequency, then keyed out an encryption preamble. Each Morse code transmission risked German direction finders. To confuse enemy intelligence, Jibilian built 2 decoy transmitters, one hidden under a hollowed tree trunk, another in an abandoned mill 10 kilometers away. When German triangulators homed in, they encountered static and silence, allowing the real signal to slip under their noses. High-altitude storms in the Balkans gather in minutes. Sunlit skies can become curtain of rain by dusk. One afternoon, thunder cracked through the valley, blasting away scaffolding and plunging the runway into mud. Villagers formed human chains to haul sandbags into drainage trenches. At night, gale winds bent lantern posts. Mussolini and Rajacic pressed their weight against the beams as rain hammered planks. The runway's fate hinged on a delicate dance between human will and nature's fury. August 1944 remains etched in diaries as the night the mountains sighed. Colonel McDowell's C-47 climbed in from Italy, skirting known flak belts by hugging the coastline at treetop level, a maneuver known as nap of the earth flying. When the plane dipped into the valley, oil lamp beacons flickered on the makeshift runway. A single green lamp, a tinted glass lantern, signaled "Go." With a jolt that rattled every bone, the wheels touched down. Silent airmen on litters and benches scrambled aboard in the 10-minute window. Engines whined, and they ascended into starlight. Corporal James Jimmy Harris pressed his mangled ankle into a canvas sling, tears brimming with relief. I felt the planks shake under me, each vibration a promise we'd live to taste home again. Nurse Lieutenant Evelyn Martin, cradling morphine for wounded men, wrote in shaky script. The night air was crystalline, as if the stars themselves watched over us. Germany's Luftwaffe deployed Bf-110 night fighters to intercept Allied transports. On Flight 004, Major Carl Weiss zeroed in on the telltale exhaust plume of a C-47, firing bursts of tracer. Pilot McDowell twisted the Dakota into swirling fog banks, executing the Lorry turn, a desperate corkscrew maneuver. Rounds peppered the fuselage, but they vanished into the mist. The wounded crewman later described feeling raindrops of shrapnel, each one a near-death caress. British Foreign Office cables derided Mihailovich as unreliable and too cautious. Churchill's decision to shift support to Tito severed RAF fighter escorts and nightly supply airdrops. OSS dispatches seethed with frustration. Without escorts, every Dakota is a lamb to the slaughter. Yet Donovan insisted the rescue must proceed. Morality, he argued, transcended shifting alliances, even at the risk of sacrificing planes and crews. When Mussolini met General Mihailovich in a forest clearing, the Chetnik leader wore a simple wool cap and carried a map margin stained with coffee rings. He studied the OSS plan, then sighed. "We fight for our king, yet our mountains know only the law of survival." Their handshake sealed a pact not of politics, but of shared purpose, to save lives at any cost. In Prenjani, local women became the operation's unsung backbone. They cooked stews in underground cellars, sewn camouflage nets from local grasses, and whispered updates as they fetched water at dawn. One school teacher, Mara Jankovic, concealed wounded airmen beneath hay bales in her barn. She later confided to her granddaughter, "Each boy was a child of mine. When I heard their laughter as they recovered, I thanked God for every sunrise." The Douglas C-47 Skytrain carried 3,000 pounds of cargo, or 28 passengers. Its Pratt & Whitney R1830 twin Wasp engines produced 1,200 horsepower each. Pilots balanced load charts meticulously. Too heavy, and the short runway risked a stall. Too light, and the mission lost efficiency. Flight engineers strapped wounded men in canvas litters. Every crewman wore a Mae West life vest, ready for ditching, though few anticipated splashdowns in Balkan streams. With no cranes to unload supplies, teams used block and tackle systems rigged to oak branches. When excess cargo threatened to rip open the fuselage door, engineers crafted timber ramps. Paramedics fashioned tourniquets from parachute webbing. A local blacksmith forged replacement faucets for radio equipment. Operation Halyard thrived on the principle that resourcefulness bridges gaps modern armies overlook. Beneath the wooden surface lay a network of concealed pitfalls. Albanian honeycomb grids, woven sticks buried just below the gravel, stabilized the soil. Drainage ran beneath plank joints, channeling water into culverts carved from limestone. At each runway end, camouflaged boulders disguised emergency braking zones. The entire strip was angled with magnetic headings, enabling accurate compass approaches despite dense fog. On September 5th, torrential rains turned planks to skating rinks. Flight 012 hovered overhead, engine idling as ground crews shackled sandbags to embankments. Colonel McDowell circled above, fuel gauges dipping into the red. Finally, the clouds broke. McDowell dove in low, locked afterburners on takeoff, and lifted off with 50 soaked men and women. That sortie became legend as the Rainmaker flight. Many rescued airmen returned home, bearing more than bullet wounds. Lieutenant Robert "Bobby" Keeling battled sleepless nights, awoken by phantom gunfire. Corporal Harris's nightmares echoed rain-soaked embankments. Yet each survivor also carried an unbreakable bond with foreign strangers who saved their lives. At a 1995 reunion in Denver, men and women wept in each other's arms, grateful yet haunted by how close they came to vanishing. With the German surrender in May 1945, Operation Halyard ended. OSS agents slipped away under new orders. Tito's partisans now ruled Yugoslavia. Mihailovic was captured, tried, and executed by the new regime. British and American records went dark. Survivors returned to civilian lives, their medals delayed, their stories unspeakable. For decades, the heroism of Pranjanese villagers and OSS operatives remained locked in vaults. A lesser-known thread of Operation Halyard involves OSS reconnaissance of Romanian nuclear facilities. Aerial photographs pinpointed suspected uranium enrichment sites near Ploiești. These images fed post-war intelligence that shaped early American nuclear policy. In this light, Halyard becomes more than a rescue. It serves as a spy network that foreshadowed Cold War rivalries. July 1997 shattered decades of silence. Historians and journalists flooded the National Archives, unearthing 56 flight logs detailing each clandestine sortie, telegram transcripts between OSS HQ and field agents, photographs of camouflaged runways and wildlife tracks, personal diaries revealing local code names and safe houses. "It was like finding Atlantis," one researcher later exclaimed. Today, Serbia celebrates Mihailovic as a national martyr. Tito's partisans once vilified him as self-serving. Western scholars debate his willingness to combat Germans versus his pragmatism in negotiating localized ceasefires. OSS cables describe Chetnik units as disciplined and effective, contradicting wartime propaganda. Operation Halyard sits at the crossroads of these narratives, urging us to confront history's moral gray zones. Recent documentaries highlight women like Mara Jankovic, Ljubica Petrovic, and countless anonymous grandmothers who risked execution to feed and tend to airmen. In 2015, a memorial plaque in Pranjani listed over 50 female names alongside OSS code names, an overdue tribute to their unwavering courage. Operation Halyard resonates in an age of drones and cyber warfare. Its lessons include: forge genuine local partnerships, resources follow trust. Embrace improvisation. Simple tools can match complex challenges. Balance secrecy with accountability. Buried truths demand future reckoning. Where today do shadow operations save lives unseen? How do we honor lessons long suppressed? At a 2002 gathering in Colorado Springs, George Mussolini addressed an audience of survivors and descendants. We flew into darkness to carry out a promise. No man or woman is expendable. We wrote that promise across the mountains with timber, sweat, and bullet scars. Tears flowed freely. A child of a rescued airman, now a journalist, stood to speak. My father survived because strangers risked death for him. That gift shapes how I live and write. Operation Halyard forces us to confront wartime paradoxes. Allies could be enemies one moment, heroes the next. Political expedience overshadowed moral duty. Yet in a smoky clearing, beneath oil lamps and pine trees, men and women wrote a different story, one of shared humanity that transcended borders. If you had 15 minutes with Sergeant Rajacic beside that flickering lantern, what would you ask? Would you plead for engineering secrets, or learn how fear sharpened courage? Share your questions in the comments below. Your curiosity keeps these memories alive. If Operation Halyard stirred your imagination, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. We dive into hidden chapters of history, covert operations, untold alliances, and the human stories behind classified files. Hit the like button if you believe forgotten heroes deserve the spotlight, and share this video with fellow history lovers. The runway at Pranjani was more than wood and nails. It was a lifeline, braided from hope and humanity. It stands as proof that ordinary people, farmers, school teachers, engineers, can alter the fate of nations when they act without fanfare. As we close this chapter, remember, history sleeps in archives, waiting for us to awaken it. Operation Halyard reminds us that the past never truly stays silent. It calls to those willing to listen. What surprised you most about Operation Halyard? Were you moved by the engineering feats, the political drama, or the quiet heroism of local villagers? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for joining us on this journey into one of World War II's greatest secrets. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and together we'll unearth the stories that shape our world.